Excellent. Let's start the conversation. So we have enough friends here. So welcome, everyone. This is our Mate Talk, our bi-monthly session with these friends here, Olga, Barry, Alex, Babesh. This time, one of our friends couldn't join us because he was a father of two babies. I'm talking about David Hasoon. He might appear at some point, but he was a parent of a father of twins a couple of weeks back. They're all fine. It's just that he seems to be quite busy at the moment.
Do I get kicked out if he joins? Like,
no, there's enough room for everyone.
All of a sudden, I get booted, and David's there going, "Hey, everybody!"
And we have a special guest today. Who's our special guest? JT from SBTA. And the reason is because for today we decided a topic that we thought was quite aligned to what SBTA is doing for our industry. And it is actually broadcasting and all our industry has been made with agreement and standardization and for years and years. It's not really nothing new. But we feel there's a room for more than just agreeing on PDFs and standardization and ways of doing stuff, but actually to start building stuff together, contributing together to what we agreed on. And an example of that is are some of the projects that are happening throughout the SBTA. So that's why we invited JT to actually kick off the conversation and see how many non-differentiated pieces are out there that we could all be collaborating on to make actually all of our companies more efficient and not reinventing the wheel all the time. And then an example we were commenting on before was the CMCD implementation in JavaScript players. Does it make any sense that every streaming company implements their own CMCD implementation in their player? Or does it make sense to have a common middle library implemented once and everyone actually gets it? Because no one's going to be better than anyone by having a different CMCD implementation. And that's just one example to kick off the conversation. So maybe that's the first question. And maybe for you, JT, what are your thoughts in general on these, and what are your main concerns or wishes on it? Like, what do you think about it?
All right. Well, I like the way you explained how we help the industry, because I was thinking we were just there to organize places to drink beer, but which is also very helpful to the industry too at certain times. Mm-hmm. I have strong opinions on the fact that streaming platforms don't differentiate themselves on technical characteristics of their video stack. They might have different experiences. They might do different content recommendations. They might have immersive experiences, live sports. They might have multi-camera view. But underneath the hood, sort of the video tech stack itself is not the differentiation. So how you implement CMCD is not the differentiation. How you encode your videos is not the differentiation. It's really your content and then the experience people have with your content. So a lot of these things I would like to see standardized. I mean, when you look at broadcast television, you can't go stand up a station right now and just build a bunch of things that you want to build. Everything has to conform to standards that in the US, the FCC has governance over. It's like the station has to operate according to this. We don't have that in the streaming video industry, right? It's kind of like wild, wild west, shoot from the hip, duct tape and bubble gum. Do whatever you can to support and make sure this service, which generates revenue, is working. So I think we've gotten past that point now. And now we're to the point where it's like, okay, how can we start to normalize this so that, if I want to switch a player out, I know that the CMCD implementation is not something I'm going to have to retool a bunch of my workflow for because they've implemented it differently. It's just, this is how it works. This is how it works in every player. This is how every player implements it. Perfect. I just swap my players out. That is what I would like to see. But it extends beyond that too. It also extends to tooling. So, implementing standards the same way is great, but then also how do you test things? That should also be done the same way. Like at DMUX, Netflix gave this absolutely amazing presentation on the tooling they built for live stream testing, how they could scale and do it like 2 hours of live stream over like 50,000 sessions in like 5 minutes. It's like, this is like mind blowing. And then somebody asked the question at the end that I wanted to ask, was like, is this open source? And of course, Netflix was like, no, it's built on our systems. It's like, okay, how as an industry do we get better at abstracting away from our systems, because the systems are all the same, so that we're building tools that everyone can use? Because again, how they test their live stream, not what differentiates Netflix from any other content provider.
Yeah, but I will ask you, and I'll ask you this question. Are you sure? Because if they do a really good job of testing and they have fewer issues, then maybe it does definitely differentiate them.
No, again, I don't think it does. I think that the quality of experience differentiates them. So they might produce a better experience, a viewing experience, but that's not dependent on the tools. Correlation versus causation, right? So, yes, the tooling helps them ensure that the underlying system they're delivering the video on can deliver that kind of quality, but it's not they can still deliver that quality. They just might not be as good as understanding why or being able to optimize without that tooling layer that they've built on top of it.
The one other thing I want to add in is, especially if you have a common, like everyone's using CMCD standards, then the people who are creating the reports and looking at the analytics and doing things downstream of that now at least can say that they've got some interoperability, and they can rely on the data properly in order to give feedback correctly on what's going on with QoE, what's going on with QoS across the platform as well too. And then the other question for like in the Netflix example is, let's say we don't necessarily need the tools. I think if at least they can publish things like, well, what are the critical components in the first place to measure, and why is this important? That's good knowledge to send across. So then it becomes, well, how well do we practice those proper policies and proper processes that you've created? That becomes a differentiator at that point. But at least, hey, let's look at this, and that's obvious because it's shared across multiple potential vendors, partners, etc.
So look at multi-CDN. Like, that's screwed up, and everybody implements it differently, and everybody has their own metrics, and it's a disaster. And then you throw in content steering, which is supposed to have this steering server, which is supposed to be like a standard way of doing it, and that's going to get implemented differently. So we're seeing this happen, right? Both on the tooling side and on the implementation side, that if there's enough latitude around the standard, people are going to implement it however they want to. And I don't think that benefits anybody. Because again,
I think having common standards, especially as like a platform provider, right? Having common standards where if I know that someone's using Wowza, I don't necessarily know what player they're going to use, right? But if they're using a bunch of different players, if I can pull common data out of that, I can give them better insight into QoE and QoS across their player stack, regardless of what tools they're using. And that's important for people. Same with Nico. Elemental doesn't necessarily specify what player you use, right? So the ability to pull common stuff out of there gives you a better opportunity to create better user experience for your customers.
Yeah, I agree with the multi-CDN example that you gave, JT. I think it's a really good example where like all major streaming services have been using multiple CDNs for many, many years, right? So we're talking about sometimes, over 10 years of standard practice being multi-CDN delivery. And so at this stage, it's like, yeah, why don't we have like a standard way of doing, bitstream switching, CDN switching, midstream, like common algorithms, common methods for doing it, common content steering servers? Because I do agree that like I think there's a difference between competitive advantage that comes because you're doing something better than table stakes. I don't believe that companies should have a competitive advantage because somebody else is delivering below table stakes, right? And when it comes to QoS and QoE, like oftentimes it feels like that, where it's like, look, it's not the intended goal of the service to give you, rebuffering and playback failures, right? That's not the intended goal. The intended goal is seamless delivery. So that is the table stakes. Table stakes should be seamless delivery, seamless playback. And then if somebody else is like doing worse than that, like that's not competitive advantage. That's just not helping out your, your colleagues. That's what happens.
Competitive disadvantage, as it should be, right?
Yeah. But that's you're muted.
You're mute. And also, let's say hi to David.
Hi, David.
You don't look
I feel
that
like I'm in
tired.
a Brady Bunch thing right now. It's kind of weird.
You are. You're
I'm used to
Jan.
not sleeping.
Lost my train of thought. Where was I? Other than now, I'm wishing David good congratulations. We love you.
I think the content steering thing's a really good example, right? Because you could implement a server in a standard way, but still maintain the control of your business logic to give you whatever advantage you chose to give yourself, right? So that is a good one. And right now it is, you're right, it's a mess.
But there may be financial obligations that people have different contracts with different CDNs, they've got different rates, etc. So there's different
That's
reasons for
abstracted from the content steering server, though.
Okay.
That's in the business rules.
Okay, yeah, you're right on that point. But I want to bring about something that I think that Casey and a couple of the folks are working on as well too, which is something that hopefully no one's going to argue with, which is all the accessibility components that are now becoming part of the common media library and whatnot. Because hopefully that's something that nobody should argue and say that I am better than somebody else.
There's a lot going on. That's a huge,
But that's a good example. Sorry, go for it.
No, you're right. I mean, yes, we would love a common way to transmit accessibility things from point A to point B, but there's such legacy and inertia behind what's there now and how people have chosen to implement things. I think it's a great idea. I think it's just going to be a ton of work.
Is anybody working on that within the group right now?
On accessibility specifically, or
yeah,
in SVTA,
or anyone that's in the chat here right now?
It's on the Common Media Library's roadmap for one of their top things they're going to take on next. So
caption rendering and parsing and all that stuff was one of the main reasons we started the library in the first place. Just seeing that the code is implemented differently across the board. It's a standard nobody should be fighting about, you'd be kind of a not great company if you were like, my captions render better than yours and I'm not going to help you make them better.
And again, are you differentiating on rendering, or maybe you're differentiating on service in whether you're doing a better job at actually transcribing the content, translating the content, and maybe that's where you can invest more or less depending on how much it is needed, depending on the content, the platform, whatever. But really on the rendering on the player, is there any differentiation? Is there any, do we want people that need accessibility to go to a different service just because our service is bad?
Well, that's the thing. Is that how you sell subscriptions? Hey, come be a subscriber. We translate our captions really well. Okay.
I think
but you don't have the show
definitely
I want to watch, so I'm out.
Definitely factoring things like how to properly parse 608 and 708 into something useful, right? That should definitely be a known solved problem. And that would be a great thing to have in there. The rendering gets tricky.
Yeah, but that's also an interesting thing you said, JT. You said, because my captions are better than yours, why would I set up for the service? You have that privilege. Some people don't.
Fair enough.
So if this captions are better than these captions and you are deaf and you have to rely on captions, that's what you do. And if the service A does not ask service B for help, would they get it? But no, I fully agree that maybe that's just accessibility things are super duper important to share information on. And maybe for us to all just talk within the industry and talk to your competitors and say, hey, how are you guys doing this? And not be afraid to actually ask for help. That might be a whole other story. But on the side of all of us here have the power to say, I don't care about captions, but there are people that don't.
Well, no, I wasn't suggesting caring. It's
just, no, but that is a differentiating factor probably for some people. I fully understand that you weren't suggesting it, but if you are trying to, we all have friends that all their text messages, and sometimes you know what they're saying, and sometimes you're like, wait, what?
No, I mean, that's a good point. Yeah.
Because that is definitely a big one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably all agree that, delivery of captions, rendering of captions, like that part, it should be standard and should be consistent, across services, across devices. Like there's no competitive advantage to that, right? So on the authoring side, sure, you can translate, like subtitles and captions better than somebody else, but yeah, delivery and rendering, that should be consistent because it really it is a mess. I mean, like if you go compare, for example, like formatting and styling of captions on different services, that's all over the place. Then like placement within the screen, right? Like who's doing a 0% save area versus like a 10% safe area, right? One of the other differences I noticed recently is that sizes of fonts are completely inconsistent across services. So what's small in one service is like large on another service, and so it is a area where, yeah, when you really kind of stop and think about it, it's crazy that we don't have that like completely standard and completely consistent by now.
So we have Casey's common media library components coming in like that. This is all going to be open source. This means it should be available to everybody as long as we can get other people who are also knowledgeable to be able to contribute to completing it. I guess how well is it functioning right now? What's the work required? What is that roadmap required in order to make it so that content providers can easily pick it up and start implementing it?
And maybe there should overall be some work done around figuring out what these other items are that are similar to captions and whatnot that should be like, because obviously if you take the world I, swim in, security, you can't open source that one. You can standardize certain aspects of it, but there was a proposal at some point to do an open source DRM. Yeah, no. That one not gonna fly. We are proponents of standards, and it makes it easier for our customers to, set it up, switch from provider to provider, and all this other fun stuff. But
at least at the packager level, the way you actually encrypt the data is standardized, right? Everybody can encrypt the data the same way.
Yeah, but Microsoft, Google, and Apple are not going to just open up security pieces and say, yeah, this is how you open source No, that's not going to work.
Yeah, I mean,
but there are probably a ton of things that should be, and maybe there's a whole, there's more conversation to be had here about which pieces specifically should be.
Well, I think there's also the question of like, at what point do you start implementing or open sourcing implementation referencing as one route to that? Like, great, here's cleaner options. That doesn't always solve everything. I think one of the interesting things I think opens up a lot of doors for some good open source collaboration and standardization a bit more is in our streaming industry now, especially in the HLS side, we've gone away from dumb manifests and static, essentially chunks that you pull to far more complex systems. JT, you touched on content steering. That's one element now that now requires server logic essentially to do streaming at a kind of consistent level. Low latency, like the low latency HLS server requirements. Like Apple gives you a very, very basic reference implementation, right? But that doesn't really cover what you're going to need into ever doing anything in the production side, right? SGAI and the server side, server guided ad insertion, right? There's now missing pieces to be able to connect this stuff even to services. That's another example, one that we brought up for summer camp, right? There's growing realm in the complexity of this stuff and the systems that you now need. So what is it that really is going to make that difference and not just make it so it's easier barrier for people to go forward, because that isn't what we want. It's not just a matter of serving that lowest common denominator of making this easy so you can create a streaming little service or something super basic, but it's something that actually has value enough that higher tier organizations want it and are willing to commit to it too, right? And is that true enough? Like, and Alex, you brought up like, well, yeah, that's when you start having competitive intelligence stuff and elements in there. Like, well, I want to own this. What is it that they need to own? What is it they don't need to own? And where, because that's where we can hopefully get the best value and contribution that handles it at the top tier quality, but everyone can have access to it and everyone can commit to it or contribute to it, I should say.
I think that contributing to it is a huge part of, you bring up that topic. because there are open source projects that like 4 people contribute to and everybody else uses, and
There's a lot of
how
those.
fair is that to then go, hey, this thing has a bug, you go fix it? Well, nobody's paying for this or whatever. And that I think is also a very interesting question of who takes ownership and to
Mhm.
what extent.
Casey, how many volunteers do you have on your side?
We are working on that at the moment. It started as me and Dan really, just in the sense that we worked across multiple open source players and we're tired of doing things 4 times and decided to do it once and saw the larger goal there. But to that previous point, the whole reason that we reached out to the SVTA specifically to host the library was so that we would get more contributors and people with the right expertise and visibility to hopefully make it more active and not just be a 1-person show. Because I mean, from the web player perspective, most of those projects started off as a 1-person show, building them up, and they grow into monsters over time. I mean, just trying to implement the dash spec is a task in and of itself. And so when it's a large spec and like a singular person's view on it, sometimes it's hard to contribute. It takes more time to learn how something is, wired up. So one of the other goals is, at least with Common Media Library, is to make everything modular. Like, I'm not trying to say, use this content steering server. That's a huge piece of code that there's so many decisions that you have to make around like you have to make it so configurable that it almost be unusable. So our focus is more about making small individual pieces that can be reused. Like to the DRM point, yes, the security side of DRM stuff isn't shareable, but there's a lot of wiring at the player that is absolutely shareable. We've written it 100 times across 4 players. So that stuff, I think thinking small and building up the pieces is the better goal. I actually talked to the guy, Hef from Mux this morning about some of this. Like Theo player, that's a player that has a lot of secret sauce that is relevant to their business. I don't expect anybody to give that stuff away for free, but it also does captions and it also does all these other things that are common, and they have a knowledge set that would be useful if they could contribute back as well.
Yeah, nobody ever
actually,
comes to these meetings,
during FOMS, Alex chaired one of the sessions about media capabilities and devices, and actually Tasso made a point, and yeah, we have a lot of these implemented, and I would be more than willing to give that away. It's really non-differentiating, a lot of ifs, and maybe you want to comment on that, Alex, because that's another example.
Yeah, like the media device capabilities detection. It's in that area where we keep reinventing the wheel. And it actually I think it confirms something that Casey was just saying, which is that I think streaming services tend to be the ones, like people who work on streaming services tend to be the ones who kind of find themselves in this position where they keep having to implement the same thing multiple times. And so I think it's probably not an accident that a lot of the contributors to like CML, for example, are folks who work on players at different streaming services, and not like folks, for example, who are developing players as a competitive advantage, right? Because if you have to implement the same thing 4 or 5 times, you eventually get to a point where you go, hold on, why are we doing this? Why isn't the standard this should be a standard? It should be shared. It should be commonly available to everybody. So I think if we're looking to identify opportunities for additional standardization, I think all we have to do is look at really our workflows, like streaming workflows end to end, and ask ourselves, where's the duplication of effort happening? Like, what are the things that we find ourselves implementing over and over again, so just slightly differently, but really kind of conceptually the same? And I think those are the candidates.
Yeah, I think we
just have to find somebody to do it.
Yeah.
So that brings the question, and I see you, Nico Whale, so you can jump in the conversation at any point if you want. Nicola, how do we create the right incentives for these? Because the SVTA exists, and I think that was Casey's point, and putting this project in the SBTA and not just a KC's repo out there makes it an institutional. But that doesn't mean that not only Paramount, but other streaming services are going to come and contribute to it. Like, is there a way to incentivize others to do it?
Yes. So we had a conversation at Bombs. So I talked with Joey Parrish, who was largely involved with Shaka at Google. And then Shannon, and I can't remember her last name, but she was formerly with LivePeer. And they had talked about this idea of doing like a bug bounty program, like so to bringing in some Web3 stuff and having basically like, hey, I'm Paramount. I really need this feature for this player. We're willing to pay $1,500 for this. And it goes onto the bounty board, and the bounty board communicates out through like video Slack, video dev Slack, and places where developers are, and they're like, oh, dude, I'll do that. So they go onto the board, and it's like, I can do that. And the money doesn't get released to them until the code has been accepted as part of the code base, right? So, so it's not just like, I built it, pay me. It's no. The open source project owner needs to say, the maintainer's like, yes, we looked at this, it works great, we tested it, and now it's going to be part of the next build. And so when I ran into the two of them, I brought in a conversation of the SVTA Foundation. So, what we're trying to do is we're trying to do a 501c3 foundation that would take in donations from big companies who want to support open source, but right now have to do it very ad hoc and there's no tax benefit to them. So we give them a place where they could come and pool their money together, and then we could give that money out to projects that come and ask for it. Like, hey, we have this project, this is what we're trying to do. We could, in fact, run the bounty board, right? So we could monitor that and we could help pay those developers. So to Olga's point, getting people to do stuff. I think there's engineers out there who want to build stuff, but they're like, I don't have time. If I put in 40 hours of this, like, it's really cool. And I like that, but like, man, this is killing me. It'd be great if there was some money attached to that. Totally understand. Like, anybody who's been a software developer has probably been a freelancer at some point too, right? So you're like, I'm okay with doing this, and my company's not going to pay me for it, but I can do it on the side. So I'm hoping that we can create this kind of system which brings organization to the way that features are funded or things are funded in the open source community that helps everybody, helps the developers because they're getting paid, helps the projects because they can request pooled money, helps the companies who want to fund it because they can donate and get a tax benefit for the money that they contribute to the foundation. So I think that's, hopefully that's where we can get to at some point. But that is definitely an issue, Olga. It's been brought up like multiple, but even talking to Romain today. So I talked to Romain today. He's, GPAC, guy behind the conformance tool. And he's expressing the same problem. He's just like, there's like 2 or 3 people in these projects that do all the work, and they want to get paid, and these other people want to get paid to do stuff, and where do you get the money? And
most open source projects aren't set up to like take money, right? They're not set up in a way that I could,
only a few are,
or Wowza could contribute. Say like, this is a great thing, we use it. Can I give? They're not set up that way, right? They're this loosely organized thing, and having a foundation wrapping that, I think, is a very interesting idea.
So hopefully that would get us to a point where we could start to standardize like some of these tools and availability and bringing visibility to them. And the thing is, it's like, how many like streaming operators use open source in their production workflows? What, all of them?
Yeah.
Multiple pieces. Like, how many use?
It's unavoidable.
Yeah, exactly.
And guilt. There's really no shame or guilt being published out there. Just like, so hey, help pay the people who are making it for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is, we need to get better about how we interact with, as an industry, how we interact with and treat open source projects, because the industry relies on them so much. So hopefully we can fix some of that. Hopefully we can get to a place where we've got some organization and some way for people to get paid to do the things that the industry needs them to do to make these pieces of software better features, less bugs, etc.
But JT, is there a timeline for when this is going to be announced and is like the structure in place? Because I think this is one of the big news pieces coming out of this little Mate talk about is the fact that there's going to be a 501c being put out there that actually creates a vehicle for this type of funding to open source projects. I think
So Nicola was the one. Yeah,
Mhm.
Nicola was the one who brought this up in the first place. Way back in February, he came to me and he's like, "Hey, we have customers. They're asking us for features in these players. We don't have resources." And I was like, "You're Amazon. How do you not have resources, Nicola?" And he's like, "No, we don't have resources." So he's like,
Yeah, you cannot buy it on Amazon. That's impossible.
so he's like, "What if I could collect money from them and we give it to the SVTA, and then you guys would pay for developers, and then you would open source the features?" And the board was like, "No, no, no, no. We don't want to get into we're a contractor." And so we kept talking about this, and we started to morph it into this, like, what if we did a foundation? Because we're not the first ones to do this. There are other, like, I think Movie Labs has done it, that there's like a foundation software arm for open source software. So it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. And our legal counsel said, "Oh my gosh, this happens all the time." Okay, great. So we eventually got the board to agree, like, we think this is a really good track to go. And that's kind of where we're at now. We're in the process of defining how it works. So we have to understand, like, what's most hygienic in terms of the SVTA running the foundation and owning the foundation and doing that. And so we actually have to make sure everything's copacetic. So we're in that process. So I'm hoping, like, hope, no guarantee, that we will have some sort of closure on yes to doing it. Here's how it's going to work, so that maybe by end of Q1 we're announcing it, because we've got some donors as well. Because a lot of these big companies, Amazon, Comcast, Verizon, they have pools of money every year to give to charitable foundations. So it's not like we have to go and convince them, like, "Hey, can you find some money?" Like, start of the year, we've got our pools reset. Like, what do you need? And we have to show from a IRS perspective, that we're passing a lot of tests they have to make sure that we're a good 501c3. We could just be a church. We thought about that. You just call yourself a church, and you don't have to prove anything. You just we're the church of streaming video.
Yeah.
But we're not.
So,
we have to pass all these rules and tests, and so we have to make sure that we're doing good for the community, that we're giving all the money back to the community. So there's just all these little things that we have to make sure, dot the I's and cross the T's. And so again, hopefully end of Q1, maybe Q2, but that's, I'm really bullish on this. I think this is a big necessary piece that's been missing in our industry.
Yeah,
excellent.
the tax deduction aspect is interesting, but it's probably not the most important one. The most important one is how to find, like, colleagues in the industry. I mean, like, competitors, partners, customers who are interested by having a feature that doesn't exist in let's say, in a given player, or a feature that can make their life much more easy, right? Because they all have the same problem. Like, one of the problem that we detected is the fact that it's very hard to automate, like, the testing of your features against a lot of players, right? There are very few solutions, and there are a couple of, like, open source frameworks that do a partial piece of this exercise, but this is a typical example where we would need to gather our forces and our fundings all together to just, like, bootstrap a new open source project that actually creates this framework that allows us to automate all of our testing across all of our, players, packagers, SSAI, DRM, CDNs and stuff. And, the impact on the industry of having such a tool that is used by everyone is just huge for interoperability. It's huge.
Yep. Yeah, so we got a bunch of different use cases. There's a use case of, I'm a company, I need this feature, or there's a use case of, there's a gap here that we could use an open source tool for. There's a use case of, we just want to make sure that tool has funding so that it's continuing on because we use it. So we got to figure out all those use cases and then figure out the way that people can abuse it and then put a stop to that. And so you always got the bad actors, so you got to stop the bad actors from acting badly. So hopefully, we'll have all of those use cases hammered out here in the next, probably by mid-November. And we'll have a blessing from our council to say, like, okay, you're doing these use cases. Yeah, these will pass the test. You're all good. And then it's really just a matter of, doing the legal stuff and then creating the relationships with the big corporations. And hey, we have some of those, and getting to the right people to get funding for the foundation.
And also getting the right people also to help in the project
community.
management and also the technical project management side of things, like validating the deliverables, validating that the development actually fits the objective, and that we actually give money for something that is working and that is like sustainable on the long term.
Yeah,
Well,
again,
like-
bad actor.
Companies can donate money to a 501c, but can't they also donate time? So isn't that another way for people to then potentially say, hey, I can allocate 20 hours of time as a charitable donation to this 501c? That can be then cordoned off. Maybe that's another way to get people to kind of volunteer and say, I'm still going to get a tax deduction for the salary of the person that's working because I'm donating that to a charity.
Yeah, that gets a little stickier because then you have to prove out like hours spent versus salary. Yeah, it's like then you have to track time, and it's not a bad idea at all, but it's just more complicated than somebody writing a check. Like, here's a check.
Yeah, and I think generally, like, lack of time is the reason why we turn often to open source projects or to contractors, right? Is because we don't have time ourselves to go do something, right? So I think donating time could be just challenging.
And also, so this is great news. Streaming Pope, as you've been renamed. But also, there were other challenges we were discussing prior to actually starting the Mate Talk, and it was sometimes it is a liability for companies to go and do open source, and so maybe you have to go through legal. So do you think there are also challenges there? That it's easier to go do your own thing and just branch it for yourself than actually go contribute it, because you got to go through so many steps? Have you actually found the challenge?
I don't know yet. So that's the easy answer to that. I don't have an answer to that.
I think that's a good question.
I'd like to ask that question to Casey.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is how difficult was it for you to go through the process when you decided to move this to an open source library within the realm of Paramount?
Paramount side wasn't honestly, the whole thing wasn't that bad, minus the licensing discussion, which is gonna be tricky no matter what. But I mean, we landed on Apache 2. I don't think anybody's got a problem with that.
No.
Yeah, so it wasn't, it took a while, but it didn't seem like all that much work. Also, because I wasn't doing much of it. I just said, hey, can I please have a repo? And eventually somebody gave me one.
And we said yes.
Yeah, and having a place to go to was the key. Because I mean, originally we were thinking CTA, like we really did want to make this bigger than just a personal library, and get expertise. And we already have. The last call was awesome, by the way.
Well, the cool thing is that became our first public project, right? So non-SVTA members can contribute to the CML. We made it a public repo. Anybody contributing just has to agree to the DCO like normal. And so we went through that process of figuring out, do people have to sign something, or no, we can just do this DCO. And then our council was like, yes, that's totally acceptable. Everyone does that. And so we tried to get rid of the barriers to allow people to come and contribute without having to be SVTA members. We hope they will say like, wow, the SVTA is really cool. Like, there's other stuff I want to participate in. Oh, my company should join, or I'm already a member, I should go participate in these other things. But that's, I'm glad that you guys brought it to us, because I think it gave us an avenue to test out sort of this concept of public projects. And now we have another with Dash.js, right? So that's another public project. And I want more of those. I want more projects that are outside of membership, so that we can get more of the industry contributing, even when, they're not members.
Well, actually, it's happened to us in the past with some minor contributions, to be honest, but that some of our customers asked us to do some changes to open source projects, and then say, you go contribute it with a Qualab's name. Like, I don't want to go through legal for this patch. Like, you put it in, I'm going to pay for it, but you do it yourself. Like, I don't want you to pay you, and then you give to us, and then it's our IP, and then we contribute it back. So there are some contributions out there that actually someone paid for, but it was easier for them to contract it. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, JT, you bring up a point about having public projects that non-members can participate in. I think SVTA needs to talk more about that. And the fact that you guys are, well, I say you, but I mean we, because we're not a member, right? We are doing that because I don't know if people know about that. And sometimes open source things or public projects would come from somebody who's like, oh, I've been battling this for whatever across X amount of companies, and maybe this should be open source, but they're not a member and we'd never hear about it otherwise. So maybe SVTA should spend some time actually saying, hey, we actually do public projects too, but you need to bring them to us.
Yeah, we should be out of
because I didn't know that non-members could contribute or talk or even bring up issues altogether, which I think is a great idea.
We actually have a public meeting for the Common Media Library once a month, right?
Yep.
So there's, we have the SVTA meetings, but then we have a public meeting to discuss roadmap and try to bring in a bigger audience. And I think, the more we promote that, the better, right? Is like, as much as I would love every company in our industry to be an SVTA member, that's just not the case.
Well, and I dropped in the poll for that Casey that you guys put together to prioritize the list. I dropped it into, Video Dev Slack, and I think people were appreciative of it. They're like, "Oh, cool!" Like,
for sure.
People were, they were like, should I answer this on behalf of my company or myself? Because my colleague wants to do something. And I was like, no, go answer them separately. Like, we want people's feelings about like what should be the highest priority. So yes. So to your point, Olga, yes, we need to do a better job of evangelizing that.
Well, actually, Vanessa Pine's presentation during DMAX about how to contribute to a FempEG was a great example.
Yep.
Like in a step by step, like how you do it, and
it's much easier to contribute.
It was educating.
It's much easier to contribute to CML. No email chains, none of that.
Yeah, exactly. Can I do a pull request, Casey, please?
Yes, you can. We welcome them.
Messy.
Wait, I have to install an IRC client first so I can chat with you.
Yes. Yeah.
And then
excellent.
Yes. Yeah, but that's a really good point. So yeah, I'll see what we can do. Olga, maybe that's part of our marketing / promotions committee is really to talk about like what can we do? What can we do to evangelize this more?
Am I being dragged into that one?
I have no idea what you're talking
by
about.
default, an extension.
Yeah, and I do think that we need to leverage the tools and the forums that we have within our own community, the stream media community. I think to reach people, because like if you look at most standards organizations, right, it's very sort of like you must be a member of this working group and you must attend meetings, right? Whereas like we have Video Dev Slack, right? Like where like pretty much everybody who attends DMUX is in that in that Slack space. And many other people that don't even attend DMUX, right? So let's use that. Let's take advantage of the fact that we have basically everybody who works in our industry at our fingertips and can reach them very easily.
And we have we try to form liaisons with lots of folks. Like we're talking with always talking with other SDOs and other associations so that we can get a connection with them and we can communicate to their members like, hey, this project's available, or let's do something jointly. And then there was, I think, like, was it OTT Red? I forget.
Yeah.
They started the WhatsApp community, and then there was a branch off of a tech version or a tech channel in it. So I need to start communicating in that channel. Yeah, I don't think we do enough. We just don't do enough evangelism. I'm out talking about it, but I don't think we're beating the drum enough in the right places. So we need to take a look at that.
Well, and
a good example.
Me as an example, because we just became members through -IF, and granted I did not attend the event in Brussels. I couldn't, but I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
And we are members, and I am on the various communications that go out.
Yeah.
So I didn't know about this, and since I didn't know, and how many of others like me are out there?
Yeah, no, and I guess that's a little bit of an outlier, because when we announced the CML last year, we did a press release and then we talked about it quite a bit. And then I think what happens is then we sort of that fervor kind of dies a little bit, and it's just becomes an active project that people would know about. But because this one is public and it's different, we need to be talking about it more.
Is there an opportunity to talk about it during MonteVIDEO?
Possibly. Yep, possibly. I mean, it's not, it's more of academic paper land, but I could probably get Alex to throw us a bone for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and get on stage and talk about CML project?
Yeah, but I feel like
Actually,
this should be in some way, shape, or form mentioned at most, especially in video dev land. Yes, Mile High is more academic, but it's a lot of dev people anyway.
Yeah, no, we should be talking about it everywhere we can. No, I agree.
Well,
I agree with that.
That's
in
a good
particular,
idea.
if the foundation's up and running by Mile High Video, that would be something to talk about, right? That's
Correct.
an
Yeah. Hopefully we'll be
overarching
doing
thing.
I'd probably all of next year is largely a dog and pony show for that. If it, once it gets stood up. So we'll be talking about that a lot.
Yeah, and
Actually,
I think the. Sorry, go ahead, JP.
You go. No, you go. Okay.
No, you go. No, you go.
I think that the charter and mission and scope of SVTA has expanded, in recent years, and so I think that's another sort of bit of evangelism that SVTA could be doing, is to really say, hey, we're taking on more than 3 years ago.
It's funny, we do. We've been doing this now for 6 or 7 years. So SMPTE in the IEEE publication has call it like SDO update issue. Mm-hmm. Where they poll, so they have us write articles. So I write an article every year for that magazine, for that specific issue of that magazine, that says, here's what we've done in the past 12 months. And so that's where I can say, we now have 12 working groups. Here are the active new projects, some example of new projects. We did this last year, or, Dash IF just joined SVTA, all we can, but, obviously that's still a limited audience, but yeah. So I think maybe 2025 is the year of evangelism. We just focus in on going out and talking about SVTA. And again, to your point, how the scope's grown, to Olga's point, hey, we have these public projects. Here's how you can get involved. Yeah, maybe that's what next year is really about.
You mean you guys do more than open caching?
I have no idea what this open caching is you just talked about. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, but JT, have members, you post something on LinkedIn and members repost, because that's just, or members share,
We poke everybody all the time about that. And sometimes people do it, sometimes they just don't. but we do try to remind people consistently, okay, go share our stuff.
But forms is a good idea, because actually that should be easy to implement, to have someone from every working group to represent SVTA's interests at events like FOMS, so that when people like Alex go and sit and say, hey, I want to discuss this topic, and I'm also working on it in this SVTA working group, and this is how you can contribute. It's a good place, because probably there are 15 people in that table that are not SVTA members, but actually are interested in that topic and could contribute.
It does happen. It does happen organically. Look what Will did at HLS Interest, right? So I didn't know he was giving a presentation on the Common Error Code project. I was like, all right, this is fantastic. We do. Alex does that. We do get people talking about the projects they're working on, or the things that they're doing that are related to, hey, I'm also in this SVTA project. We're trying to standardize this. So it does happen organically. And we tried to have a role for every working group called a technology ambassador. And it was just a little too difficult to manage. And, people weren't always at events, and they didn't really know, okay, should I go to this one? But my company's not going to pay me. So it got a little weird, but it happens organically, which is great. And we just need to do it more consistently.
Totally off topic,
Excellent.
but right now with the two of you at the very top of my screen, it looks like your bookshelf is just extending all the way across. It looks great.
Well, it actually goes all the way around my office.
Into JT's office.
So
Even JP loves.
yeah, I'm at JT's office. So we have 5 more minutes, and then we're done. Is there anyone in the audience, Scott, Chris, Nico, Casey, or any of you guys that want to share your any final thoughts or any questions that you haven't asked but we should be discussing about it?
So I went to school at the University of Waterloo, and it was known in Canada, at least, for its internship programs. And I'm wondering, do any of these types of industry groups go into universities to advocate? Because I know as a former young person, I had a lot of energy once. And so like, and a lot of, I don't know, a lot of this technology was built by people who, you know, coming out of school who were really passionate about these types of topics. So is that something that people are doing? Like,
We do it. I think we all do it a little bit, not in an organized fashion. So we have thought about trying to have like a university membership level where we would give universities a free membership, and then they could like authorize students to come and participate. You know, so like USC has a huge media lab. You know, MIT has a media lab. So getting these places that have concentration. So right now, we kind of have a relationship with Ozgen University in Turkey because one of our co-chairs and a guy who's really big in the industry, Ali, he tries to bring his students in. So we signed them up as SMEs. Mm-hmm. They've contributed to projects, but we're not doing it in a concerted way. So the answer, I guess, is kind of, and beyond that is we could do way better. I would like to be more involved in universities. I'm an academic at heart, so I would like to be way more connected to the university systems.
Yeah, and in terms of like people breaking into the industry, having them contribute to open source projects is a great way to kind of build up expertise and as well as, you know, improve their resumes and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Right? You bring in new blood, bring in people with really cool, innovative ideas to work alongside with folks who've been in the industry a long time. Good things happen.
And I think part of it is
I was gonna say you could partner with the universities. These kids could get credit for doing this, right? I mean, it goes both ways.
Thought of that too. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really we were at JP did that last year or earlier this year in Uruguay. Remember, we went to his university. Mm-hmm. Part of it was not just to convince people about writing this type of stuff, but part of it is just to say, hey, if you're in computer science, if you're doing programming and whatnot, why don't you look at video? You're using it every day. Why don't you focus and get into this part of the industry that is not as known? Like, who wants to be one of 1,000 developers writing, you know, doing whatever you're doing for some large corporation when you can be one of very few who know about streaming video and who know about content protection and know about, you know, authenticity. There's so much stuff that can be added in that they can now point to and talk about and say to their friends and family, I'm working on that, and you're watching it.
You could be one of the word streaming AI.
JT, I mean, is there a place in SVTA to also, you know, allow access, get people involved more from the university level? Like, it's an amazing exposure to what the industry is. And why I say to be careful, like, yes, you might not, they might not be the pro they always think they are when they're in those last couple years of college. But that doesn't mean that they don't have ability to contribute. Absolutely. I also the fears. I don't want it to be like a wave of all these university people coming over and drowning out the voices of the people who have a lot of experience that are driving some of this stuff. So I see it also as a double-edged sword, but it has a really interesting potential to get exposure and get these people involved and make that part of their career from the get-go of how they can give back to the community and the industry more specifically. But
David, there is kind of a shield to that sword because I don't know, definitely like, talk is cheap, submit, push code, right? Or, submit a pull request. They've open source has an ability to kind of filter out bad crap, at least.
I agree. Open source I'm just talking about SVTA and some of the other. Is there other involvement there that can drive that, and that drives the excitement, which then drives the commitment to the open source and doing pull requests and all the other stuff. I mean, that'd be the theory, right? No.
I'm the one who's proposed this university membership. Talk about it. There is an issue with universities and the stickiness of IP that they have. So it's that's something we'd have to probably tackle. But I really would love to have the universities more involved. They're doing a lot of cutting edge research in terms of some of these really big challenges in video, and we really, and obviously places like Mile High Video try to draw that in. It would be great to have some of those folks actively contributing more and exploring our industry.
And maybe the key is for us to define a list of projects that are less critical but still very useful to the industry. I'm just going to give you a quick example, actually raised by Ali during the HLS Interest Day. He asked Roger, hey, do you have any plan to open source the media stream validator? And Roger said, no, sorry, we are using our internal components in there, and so there is no way, it's never going to be open source. But what if we would be launching a new initiative open to university students to actually build the open source HLS media stream validator. Maybe that would be something a lot of people would be happy to contribute to.
Well, and again, the idea of the foundation is not just for open source; it's also potentially to fund grants for research, right? So, university, somebody, professor at university, come to us. I've got a team. We need $60K. Here's what we're doing. Like, it could be, we're going to build an HLS.js validator. Oh, fantastic! So then it's, again, we get the university type. There's all of these opportunities. I think that that we just need to figure out how to take advantage of best.
Excellent. So, sorry, everyone, but we're running out of time. I want to respect everyone's agendas. So it's been a great conversation. Thanks, JT. Thanks to all our usual guests and
I'm sorry,
members of the Mate Talk.
That's streaming Pope, please. Like, let's get that straight.
Respect titles. That's right. Yeah.
I did change my name.
He did change it. He did change his name.
Yes, and you are streaming Pope, JT.
I'm gonna do a sticker for that. Beware.
Yeah, I need a t-shirt
with his face.
Oh yeah,
yes.
Okay, sorry.
Nico, you're in charge of creating all the music for the church.
I can't do that. I can't do that.
This is fantastic.
Churchofstreamingmedia.org is
I'm
$10 a
sorry.
year.
I feel like there's going to be a church of streaming media. I think it's actively walking into that direction.
100% agree with you.
Definitely. So thanks everyone for joining. It's been a great conversation as usual. I love having all your different points of views, hearing all voices. And I think this is the way we're building the future of our industry together, by sharing, collaborating, also sometimes disagreeing. But in the most, I think it's all of us here are looking towards the same objective. So thank you all. This is the last Mate Talk of the year, because we're not going to do one in December, unless you want to have like a Christmas Mate Talk, but it says actually just all of us with the champagne and all that.
We could
if
do
you want
it,
to have a session.
I'm okay with champagne mate talk.
Okay,
make it a drinking game.
Yeah.
But you're going to be the host, Barry. And if it's going to be a drinking game, Alex and Olga, I know you have a very good friend to call.
I'm joining for that one. 100%.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to have a drinking game in December. Thanks everyone for joining.
Sounds great.
Thanks, everybody.